Alrighty, so today I want to review OpenAI. So they traded trust for contracts and the QuitGPT movement went viral. So I'm going to start up Edward. I'm going to give him the context here, and we are going to go into this.
Hello, this is Edward. Who am I speaking with?
Hey Edward, it's Troy. So you and I are going to review OpenAI, and I want to look at some of their positioning in regards to they traded trust for contracts and a bunch of users quit and went over to Claude. However, there's interesting tension going on right now with Claude because users are saying that their limits were cut in half, and there's a lot of tension, and I think OpenAI is going through a massive shift because they're shutting down Sora. I think they should be doubling down on Codex. And if I look at their homepage, there's not much here other than a chat box up top. If you go to openai.com, there's nothing really about their mission, their vision, what they're trying to do. They went from AI for humanity to Pentagon contractor. And I think that broke a lot of trust with their audience. I think they lost I think there's like 700,000 people. Um, yeah, that's my first thoughts, and I want to dive into this with you.
Troy, that's a rich brief. Before I start forming any architecture around this, I want to ask you something direct.
Yeah,
When you say they traded trust for contract,
yeah, sorry,
who
continue.
specific, who do you think OpenAI's core audience actually believes they are? Not what OpenAI says they are, but what that audience believed they were before the Pentagon deal changed things.
Gosh, I mean, I think everyone believed they're your friendly neighborhood GPT. And then once they basically swooped in, and I get it, like once they swooped in and took Claude and on Anthropic's contract, you kind of get to see them for what they truly are, which is fascinating because like it seems like they have a heart and it seems like they really actually do care because I know they do. However, there's also, truth in what you do versus what you say.
That's a sharp observation. And that tension you just named, what you do versus what you say, that's not a messaging problem. That's a positioning fracture. So let me ask you this. When that fracture happened, what do you think the audience lost? Was it trust in the product? Or was it trust in the identity they had projected onto OpenAI?
Well, the narrative was that Anthropic didn't trust some of the calls and like basically being able to look at sensitive data and whatnot to track citizens. I think that was a part of the narrative. And I think that even though that might not have actually been in the terms and necessarily defined like that, like when OpenAI AI took it on, I don't think it was actually defined like that in the contract. However, that narrative went viral, it went global, and I think a lot of people realize that, oh my gosh, maybe I'm actually being tracked by GPT. The thing is like I like Claude, I like Codex, I like OpenAI. I think I like both companies because they have their own use cases that are worth being unique upon. And I think right now Claude's just been doing quite a bit better. Like there's a code red meeting inside of OpenAI to basically work with the team. And like, I'm sure that's why they're reverting resources from Sora to Codex and actually like the the actual foundation of the model. So they don't just totally lose the race to Claude. So there's that.
That's fascinating context. And here's what I'm hearing underneath all of that. The narrative didn't just damage OpenAI's reputation. It actually repositioned them in the public mind without their consent. They went from being the protagonist of the AI story to being cast as the antagonist, and they didn't fight back on the positioning level at all. Now here's what I want to dig into with you. You mentioned their homepage, just a chat box, no mission, no vision. Do you think that emptiness is a symptom of the fracture? Or do you think that was always who they were and the fracture just made it visible?
Hmm. Well, I think this worked at the beginning. This is really wonderful. That just gives you an example of like what GPT can do. But I'm pretty sure I don't want to say everyone's aware because like AI is taking time to adopt, but also the most rapid adoption we've ever seen. Huh. I think this homepage being just the chat box isn't as powerful as it could be because it's just another chat box. Like, yeah, that's cool. But I also believe that it could have a deeper, stronger narrative.
Right. And that's the core positioning problem. When you were the only chat box, the chat box was the statement. Now that there are dozens of them, the chat box is just a commodity interface. It no longer communicates identity, mission, or differentiation. So here's the question that I think is really at the heart of this. If OpenAI had to pick one thing, one singular idea that they own in the mind of their audience, what do you think that should be? Not what they're saying now, but what they could authentically claim given everything you know about where they're headed with Codex, with their internal restructuring, with the founder getting back involved.
I mean, the first thing that comes up for me is like AI for work, because I think their goal is to penetrate enterprise and get enterprise contracts. The goal is to integrate, you don't just want people generating images of cats, and that's fine. But you don't also want people just using it for search. You want them ingrained and enthralled in the process. And I think that Codex can really bring you into that world. I know that they're introducing ads, and I think that was also a big fracture of trust. I mean, obviously it makes sense for the free version because if you're on free, yeah, you're going to get some ads. If you're on paid, you won't get them. Okay, that's fine. But at the same time, uh, I don't know. I think there's a way of integrating it with work in a deeper, more meaningful way that is just not, yeah, like if I go down all the way, like down the page, there's a thing, a salvage yard in Nevada, a seed farm in South California, a tamale shop in California. So they have like these stories about businesses and how it's being helped. But at the same time, like, yeah, those are some of my first pushbacks.
Okay, so that's actually really telling. They have the proof points, the salvage yard, the tamale shop, the seed farm, but they buried them at the bottom of the page. That means the emotional entry point is still a chat box, and the strategic proof is an afterthought. That's a sequencing problem. They're leading with the tool instead of leading with the transformation. Now, here's what I want to push on. You said AI for work, but so does Microsoft Copilot, so does Google Gemini, so does pretty much every enterprise AI play right now. So if OpenAI goes that direction without a distinct frame, they're just another contestant in a race they used to lead. So what do you think OpenAI has that none of those players can authentically claim?
Hmm, good question. That's a tough one, actually. What do they actually have that no one else can claim? Well, I know, no, there's research, there's science, that's cool, but they all have that. Give me another question to get clear on that frame.
Let me come at it from a different angle. When someone chooses OpenAI over every other option, not because it was recommended, not because their company mandated it, but because they genuinely chose it, what do you think that person believes about themselves when they use it?
Honestly, not much. There's not anything that comes out for me.
That's the gap right there. And that's actually one of the most important things you've said in this entire conversation. Because the strongest brands in the world, the ones that command loyalty, premium pricing, and forgiveness when they make mistakes, they all have one thing in common. The user feels something about themselves when they use it. Apple users feel like creators. Harley-Davidson riders feel like rebels. Even Patagonia customers feel like they're part of something that matters beyond the product. OpenAI right now gives you nothing to feel about yourself. And that's not just a branding problem. That's a positioning vacuum. And into that vacuum, competitors will pour their own narrative. So here's what I want to ask you. Given everything, the Pentagon fracture, the Codex pivot, the enterprise direction, the founder coming back. If OpenAI could make their user feel one specific thing about themselves, what should that feeling be?
Make the user feel something specific about themselves. Man, that
Yeah,
is a tough one. So, what I think the user should feel about themselves. I mean, they should feel, it sounds so vague, but they should feel a level of special. And I think they're starting to do that with Codex, and they've been increasing the limits in regards to competing with Claude. So that does make the users feel special. However, that is a very hard frame to keep up because then you just keep giving perks and bonuses and goods, and eventually that train runs out. Hmm. I need you to help me go deeper on this.
let me ask you this. Who is the person that OpenAI is actually built for at their core? Not the tamale shop owner, not the enterprise CFO signing contracts. The person who was there from the beginning, who believed in what OpenAI was doing before it was mainstream. What kind of person is?
Developers.
Yes. And what does a developer want to feel?
Taken care of, empowered. This is interesting because that's where I think they should be doubling down on Codex. Like, it's an incredible tool and platform, and I keep getting a lot of messages from people asking about how do I build agents? How do I make this integrate into my business? How do I do all this stuff? So we're still at the beginning adoption curve of a lot of AI getting integrated into everything. And I think if Okay, I think this is interesting because there's a lot of developers, there's a lot of people that work with AI and then think they're developers, and then there's a lot of developers that are actually just better at what they do because of it. So let's keep digging deeper onto this thread with me.
Okay, so here's what's emerging. There are three distinct people inside that developer frame. There's the traditional developer who's been coding for years and now has a superpower. There's the business operator who thinks in systems and is using AI to build without a technical background. And then there's the emerging builder, someone who couldn't build before and now suddenly can. And here's the tension. Those three people want to feel completely different things about themselves. So which one of those three does OpenAI actually have the most credibility with? And which one is most underserved right now by every player in the market?
Hmm. Well, I think I think because developers often lead the charge, I don't want to say that they're underserved. I think there's a heavy competition there for coding models. However, it's dangerous that Claude Code is cornering the market for developers because what we're seeing like today is, you put a handful of prompts in and you're maxed out. And that's insanity in regards to totally kiboshing your developer market. Like basically people that are on max plans feel like they're on basic plans, which is I think it's gonna really hurt them if they don't sort that out.
Right? So Claude is creating an involuntary opening for OpenAI right now. Their own limitations are pushing developers away at the exact moment OpenAI is doubling down on Codex. But here's what's critical. That opening is temporary. It's a frustration window, not a loyalty window. If OpenAI just catches those developers because Claude annoyed them, that's not positioning. That's opportunistic.
Yeah, yeah, continue. That's opportunistic.
And those developers will leave just as fast when Claude fixes their limits. So the real question is, what would make a developer choose OpenAI not because Claude frustrated them, but because OpenAI means something to them that Claude never could? And I want to sit with you on this for a second because I think the answer lives somewhere in the origin story. OpenAI was founded on a specific belief that AI should be open, accessible, and built for humanity. That belief attracted a very specific kind of developer, not just someone who wants to ship code faster, but someone who believes they are building something that matters. So here's my question. What if OpenAI's positioning wasn't about the tool at all? What if it was about the type of builder they believe in? What kind of builder does OpenAI exist to serve?
I mean, the miracle story that they could always lean back on is becoming at least even a level of open source. Like they released, I think it was OSS. Um, they released that a while back, and everyone was pretty astonished because they were competing. You had DeepSeek, you had all these companies going open source, Quinn, whatnot. I think they could potentially flip that script and become extremely open source in regards to releasing local models for developers that they can run on their machines that are just efficient, incredible. I don't know. I'm not sure if that script would flip and build all of the loyalty back, but it would restore trust that's likely lost.
That's a powerful instinct. And here's why it matters strategically. Open source isn't just a product decision, it's a positioning declaration. It says, we trust you with the keys. And for a developer, being trusted with the keys is the ultimate form of respect. But here's the tension I want to expose. OpenAI's entire revenue model is moving toward enterprise contracts, Pentagon deals, closed API ecosystems. So if they go open source as a positioning move, they're creating an internal contradiction that will fracture their identity even further. So Troy, here's the fundamental question that I don't think OpenAI has answered yet. And honestly, I'm not sure they can answer it without making a very uncomfortable choice. Who is OpenAI actually for? The developer who wants open access and believes in AI for humanity? Or the enterprise and government client who wants proprietary, secure controlled AI? Because right now they're trying to be both. And in positioning, when you try to own two opposing identities simultaneously, you end up owning neither. Can they actually answer that question clearly?
Good question. I mean, money's in the enterprise, and if they're willing and able to turn around their balance sheet, because I think there's like, I can't remember this volume of losses they're about to take this year. If they want to turn around their balance sheet, the developers aren't going to do that for you. It has to be the enterprise, it has to be the companies. Then again, you have to cater to the developers that work inside the companies because they don't want to work with less than tools. So there has to be a bridge between those two.
That's the insight right there. The developer isn't the end customer. The developer is the gatekeeper to the enterprise customer. So the positioning architecture actually has two layers. You win the developers' respect and loyalty first, and they pull OpenAI into the enterprise from the inside. The developer is the Trojan horse into the contract, which means OpenAI doesn't have to choose between developers and enterprise, but they do have to sequence it correctly. Developer trust comes first. Enterprise revenue follows. And right now they have that completely backwards. They're chasing the enterprise contract publicly, which is destroying developer trust, which is undermining the very pipeline that feeds enterprise adoption. So here's what I want to ask you, Troy. If you were to define the one enemy that OpenAI should be positioning against, not a competitor, but an idea, a belief, a way of thinking that they stand in opposition to, what would that enemy be?
Who would their enemy be? And this enemy would be for developers.
Yes. So what is the idea or belief that every serious developer is fighting against every single day?
It has to be clean code. Because I think like Codex, actually, I think that's one thing that Codex is incredible at, is it does deliver very it does deliver quality code. So I think the enemy is, I mean, enemy slop, AI slop, sloppy code bases, sloppy management, sloppy, just slop, terrible ways of organizing. I think, I think that's a piece of it.
Yes, and there's a word for that in the developer world. It's technical debt. The enemy is technical debt, the accumulation of bad decisions, rushed code, fragile systems that slow everything down and eventually collapse under their own weight. And here's why that's powerful as a positioning frame. Every developer lives with that enemy every single day. It's not abstract, it's personal. It's the thing that keeps them up at night. It's the thing that makes their work feel meaningless instead of meaningful. So what if OpenAI through Codex positioned itself not as a coding assistant, but as the platform that serious builders use to finally get ahead of the debt instead of constantly drowning in it? That's not AI for work. That's not another chat box. That's a declaration of war against the thing developers hate most about their own industry. And Troy, here's what's interesting. Claude can't own that position. Microsoft Copilot can't own that position authentically. But OpenAI, with Codex, with their research depth, with their origin story of being built by and for serious builders, they might actually be able to claim it. Does that frame resonate with what you're seeing in the market?
Yeah, you know what? It does because Claude is co-work. Claude is releasing all these tools that they're incredible tools, but at the same time they're owning the AI for workspace. If OpenAI doubles down into Codex, makes Codex the star, then Codex essentially will help them develop better, stronger models too. Because I think the releases of their last few models, like GPT 5.4, is incredible at code, but I think it's just less of a good conversational partner. Um, hmm, interesting. I like this.
That's a really sharp distinction. GPT-5 is a reasoning engine. Claude is a conversational partner. And right now, OpenAI is trying to market a reasoning engine like it's a conversational partner, and it's falling flat because that's not what it's built for. So what if they stopped competing on Claude's terms entirely? Because here's what's emerging from this entire conversation. Claude owns the workspace. Claude owns the conversation. Claude owns the collaborative feel. And if OpenAI keeps trying to fight on that battlefield, they will keep losing ground. But there is a battlefield Claude cannot win on, and that's depth of build. The serious technical infrastructure level work that powers everything underneath the workspace, tools that Claude is selling. OpenAI through Codex could own the foundation layer, the place where the real builders live, the ones who are building the tools that everyone else uses. And Troy, that's actually a more powerful position than workspace. Because whoever owns the foundation controls the future. Now, I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with this one. If OpenAI owned that foundation layer position, the platform that serious builders use to construct the future of AI itself, what would need to be true about their homepage, their messaging, and their relationship with developers for that position to be believable?
Gosh, they'd have to make releases in regards to Codex like actively. Since they're nuking Sora, they're getting rid of Sora, they're getting rid of I think they're trimming the fat so they can start doing this, but they would have to be shipping consistent updates for this. Now, I did see an article here, March 6th, introducing Codex Security now in research preview. I know that Claude is working on something like that. That's interesting. OpenAI. Yeah, so they would have to really start making significant releases and start demonstrating publicly how they just write better foundational code. They write less slop. They would have to start a PR campaign in regards to that and actually own it and own it in product and in message.
Exactly. And that's the difference between a positioning claim and a positioning proof. Because any company can say, we build better. But OpenAI would have to demonstrate it consistently, publicly, and specifically in the language that serious developers actually speak, not marketing language, not homepage copy. GitHub releases, technical documentation, open benchmarks, developer community engagement. That's where that position gets earned. And here's what's interesting about Codex Security dropping into research preview right now. That's not just a product release. That's a signal. Security at the foundation level is exactly the language that gets enterprise developers to pay attention. Because the number one reason enterprises hesitate on AI integration isn't capability. It's trust at the infrastructure level. So they're actually starting to move in the right direction. But nobody is connecting the dots for them into a coherent positioning story. And Troy, I want to pause here for a second because we've been building something significant in this conversation. We've uncovered a positioning fracture.
Yeah, that was incredible. So, okay, that are some of my thoughts here on how OpenAI can reposition. I really think they're going to be doubling down on Codex. I use Codex quite often. I like having both actually. They're both like Claude and Codex are quite intelligent. I just think that this whole debacle here right now is going to hurt Claude in the short term. So I think there's a way for OpenAI to re-grasp this whole track. So, anyways, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.